Hey everyone, welcome to the Lake Michigan Angler Podcast. I'm Rob, this is Michael, and today our guests are Craig Bender and Jim Mueller of Stormtrooper Charters. Welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, thank you. And Craig, remember, it's a family show.
Yes, I'll keep it.
The editors, me, would be appreciative. No.
Yep. Where's my teleprompter?
No, this is unscripted.
Yeah, come on,
this
man.
is us just. You know, the idea is that we're just kind of shooting the breeze together. Only we just have a camera in our face and some microphones and whatnot. But the core idea, which is what we hope to capture, is just like how before we started, you guys were just out there talking about various things, fishing related and whatnot, and that's the idea with this. So thank you both for being here. Can you guys both share a little bit about your background on fishing Lake Michigan and where you got started and how long you've been doing it?
Sure. Man, we're going back to 1978. That's how old I am.
Oh boy.
Neighbors, some friends. I was pretty young, and I just hitch a ride wherever I could to go fishing. And it wasn't just Lake Michigan. And then I got hooked on Lake Michigan going out with the neighbors. I think I was 16. I had a 15-footer. I was going out there, and maybe some stuff I shouldn't have been going out in. And then my parents realized that. I stepped up to an 18-footer. They helped me out, supported me, and it went on from there. And then I got a 26 Pursuit. I had that for many years. Now I got my 29. I've been chartering since 95, and then I hooked up with Craig here for many years with tournaments, and pretty successful combination. He's been a great help. He carries a lot of energy and experience to the team, so... And here I am.
Awesome. Craig, yourself?
Yeah, I'm from northern Wisconsin, so I did spend probably more time on Lake Superior early in the year. I moved down here in the late '80s when I finally bought a 21-foot boat, enough you could get go out in some bigger waves. And I bought a 27-foot boat, and then of course I kind of got rid of that a few years ago, and I've been fishing with Jim and my other friend Jim mostly. So kind of my deal on that.
Got you. So let's talk about fishing. What are some of the things you guys are doing here that before you even step out on your boat that are really kind of like key things that help you when you are on the water?
Yeah, that's we could have a long discussion on that, but basically sometimes your better fishermen have a tendency to spend a lot of time on their boat working on their gear when they're not fishing. So if you got 5 hours of fishing, sometimes after the fishing and before, so consistently over the years to make things very smooth, me and Craig will be on the boat, and we're trying to get all the rods right, the right order, trying to put the lures away correctly, everything you could do through the season. Your swivels, your knots, the harder work you put into that, the less problems you have on the water, especially in a tournament. One mistake could cost you a tournament. 2-3 small mistakes over the season in the tournaments. You'll hear a lot of stories from a lot of guys stating that if these 2-3 things didn't happen, they would have won 2-3 more tournaments. Okay, so there's a lot of people out there with a lot of knowledge on how to fish. So we try to put a lot of time on our program and get organized before we fish and after fishing for the next day.
Yeah, it's interesting because this past season I went out and got to experience tournament fishing. I was on the boat and I was observing. We were kind of filming it for the shop and whatnot. And it was really interesting to see that dynamic, right? Because like you said, when you talk about organization, these guys have everything in specified locations, labeled, broken down in so many different ways. And what I saw, which I always found interesting, was that they were, as soon as a fish was in, one guy would clear it, another one's like, it was this whole thing. Yeah. And I'm sure, Craig, that's when it comes to this kind of fishing and when you're in those situations, that's the difference between what, limit or not, or big fish, or just.
Yeah, that's part of it, but paying attention to what you did, and the same guy, if you're fishing on the bottom for lake trout, the same guy is going to set that same rod again because his 6 feet versus my 6 feet are 4 feet apart, and it can make a huge difference in how you put it into downrigger release, if it's gonna release, or little things that you're fishing trout and you got a little squeak on there and you didn't pull your rigger rod up and check it, or you got green moss on there, and there's little things that make a huge difference. If the fish are biting, anybody can catch them. They're committing suicide, but these days when they're just nipping on it and you got a little squeak on there, well, not only you got a little squeak on there, but it messed the whole rest of your rods up because you're dragging a little fish, if it's a little king or whatever. So checking your equipment a lot and paying attention to your hooks, making sure your hooks are sharp. I mean, that's the one thing I do pride myself on. And if I'm not sharpening or having Jim or my other friend Jim sharpen them, I'm definitely paying attention to just little things, because if you're losing fish, that means your release isn't too tight, and your dipsies, if you're losing fish in dipsies, well, crank it down a little bit. But because you can definitely tell when you go to a tournament, say, I was 13 for 27 today, and if we went to lost something, well, we were 15 for 17, and but either we slowed the boat down or we did something or yelled at each other before we had lost the fish. And that's what I like to do. I like to get excited before we lose a fish, because if you lose a fish, it's already too late. But turn the boat 10 degrees, but the guy with the fishing rod has to tell you what to do. And that's the big thing with Jim, is that Jim doesn't, I told Jim, get on the wheel, or one of the guys get in the wheel and throw it in a neutral, or speed it up or something like that, or change it 10 degrees, but it makes a huge difference. You do not want to have a mess.
Right.
You don't want your dipsy diver fish to go out and take out a copper, because you're out a half an hour or more, and that's a lot of just
that'll cost you.
yeah, but getting excited before it's too late.
Yeah.
You can't do a Mike and a Canelli after you lose the fish. It's already too late, and then it kind of, you have to rally. So
why not? I do.
I know you do.
So what he's saying too, so sometimes if you have the side of a boat that's working because of current, which happens, okay, so then to be a little more detailed about that, so when Craig says 10 degrees or something, sometimes it's trying to land a fish, and sometimes it's just trying to get the other side of the boat to work with the other side, especially as you fish in the deeper water. And then when you talk downrigger releases, that's where it gets tricky. When you're fishing down 30, 40 feet, it's not a big deal, right? When you start getting out into 200-300 feet, like we're doing these days, and it's the trend, you got to have your release tight, but then if you don't get a release 200 feet down, sometimes you're dragging a lake trout. So Craig will constantly check the lines if he's on the boat. Sometimes you can't keep up when it's one guy. So a tournament situation is a little bit different than a charter, but you want to get your releases right. So the other part he was discovering, or talking about, was that you have one guy that's on a hot rod and it's working, especially in a tournament. I just make him set it, And if I'm struggling on a rod or setup, I'll say, Craig, you take over. I don't care what you put on it, or what you got to do. So sometimes you got to change things up. You always have to be thinking.
So you guys have like it's not like one person is set for one spot on the boat. You guys kind of just rotate around. Someone might have kind of the hot hand, if you would, in terms of like maybe setting something out and just kind of ride that out.
Well, if it's not working, you got to try something different, just like they changed the blackjack dealer at the table sometimes when things ain't going right, and then you got to get up and leave, okay? Yeah. So yeah, we believe in that, but you got to have the people on the boat you could trust. I mean, I have 2 Craigs that fish with me, and I've been fortunate enough to fish with a lot of good fishermen that are like captains themselves. But then you got to be careful, because you get too many captains that are strong-headed towards each other.
I was just wondering about that dynamic. Yeah,
right? Exactly. You're right, and that dynamic is pretty important. And then you always got to watch the experience of being burnt over the years. A bent hook, a doll hook, a hook that's coming out of the split ring, which you see a lot of times, the steelhead roll on them, and you're still fishing with it. And next thing you know, that fish swipes your hook. And yeah, you think that's funny, huh?
It's not funny.
That sounds like there's memories there.
You get a bite. It's what he's pertaining to is like you get a bite, a good rip on a copper, and you're busy, okay? So you don't go back and check that one till the end of the charter, and then you don't have a hook on it, or a lure on it, and it's like then we're yelling at each other because we didn't check it, because you got 11 fish on it in 20 minutes period, and that one that had the best hit is missing the hook or missing the spoon, and
worse, the lure.
The lure, yeah, the whole works. And it's like, you can't tell until you check it. So that's
Craig checks them a lot, and that makes a difference. So when he jumps over and fishes on Jim Carrington's boat, my production does go down a little because of things like that. He'll constantly reel them in. You know, he'll change a lure and then go change the next one, especially when you're running a lot of coppers, a lot of cores. You got 8 of them out. Having extra people, because he'll sit there and reel them in. You know, he'll reel them in, he'll change them, and then he'll check them. You just get a bump. You know, if it's a tournament or you're fun fishing, you get a bump. You're fun fishing, you might relax and say, who cares? I'm going to go drink my beer. But if it's a tournament, you got to reel it in. And every time we do, it's like it's fine. And then the time you don't, the lure's gone, the swivel broke, you know, hook's gone. It's happened. Okay.
You know, as you were saying this, a thought came to mind. Obviously, when you're tournament fishing, there's a level of pressure because you want to produce and place and whatnot. How would you compare the pressure of a charter versus a pressure of a tournament? Because in both you want to produce. In fact, you need to produce, right? Is there a difference to that? Is it the same? Do you find one a little bit more, a little more pressure than the other?
I'll start on that, and then Craig, you could finish up. But it's a different pressure because people are paying you money.
Right.
The tournament pressures, I put more on myself than I should. I'm sure Craig does with me because I probably put it back on him. You know, when you have some success in a few tournaments, you feel like you build pressure on yourself. So the more you win or have success, you put pressure on yourself. There's no reason, okay? But we do it, okay? And so there's a different pressure that way. And the other one is with the charters, people are paying you a lot of money for a short period of time, and you got to produce. And they don't want to hear that, oh, the fish were biting yesterday. Tomorrow will be a better day because it's cloudy, you know. So you got to find a way, you know.
You know, I like just tagging along on a charter, helping Jim out because it's like a tournament. You know, I just like getting the bite. So I like having a bad day or a tough when fishing's tough because we will dial it in. It might take us 3 hours, but we will almost always do very, very well unless it's just you go out at noon and you have to be in at 4 o'clock or it's just the dog days of summer. But tournament wise, pressure when the fish aren't biting, we usually have to make a move. And knowing where to go and convincing Jim that's where to go. In many times it does work. I mean, if you're a long ways away and you're worried about the weather, hey, we might pull into some shallow water that we didn't fish before this year, but we fished before in the past. And that has worked out for the most part very well. But, just knowing, I mean, the year that we won the Pass the Passion, I think we moved – 3 times that year? We caught
never quit, never give up.
Yeah, we had a lead. We were catching kings with lake trout off of Racine, and we caught our lake trout. We never got a king, and it's like this is not working. And when you have a lead, you got to catch your fish. You got to come in with your whatever it's 10 or 15 fish, and if you don't do that, so we had a pressure of going to get our fish, or just some smaller silver cohos and steelhead, and then having the wherewithal to know where to go back on the hill and catch some kings later in the morning. But, that's pressure, but it's also strategy, and experience where when fishing's good, somebody's going to go out and just have a great day in this one spot and beat you. But, pressure just hanging in there, but don't give up.
Yeah, in detail, he was talking about day 1 of Passion, and usually the leader has a hard time maintaining that lead in day 2. And so everyone's like, I don't want to be the leader on day 1. I'll take that chance. You put me there, I'll take that on. So what he's saying is when we were fishing our trout, we were fortunate enough on day 1 to catch 3 Chinooks fishing our trout. That don't happen often. There's luck in that too, So we caught our trout and they were not biting well, and we got them, and now we got like no salmon. And we're like, we got to move. And you can't use the radio, I think, that year yet.
You couldn't.
So we made a move and got some cohos. First thing we did, we lost a big king, big deal. Caught some cohos, and we made a third move. And when we set up, there was no boats in the area, and we needed 3 fish, but we needed a king or 2. We needed something kicker-wise. A dream come true. It was like 9:30, 10 o'clock. We had room for 3 spots on that last day, and sure enough, we had 3 Chinooks in a row. And we went on guts on the third move. and we caught those 3 Chinooks, and then we went in kicking ourselves that we kept 2, 3 more cohos, that we could add a few more kings. Now, it worked out. You can always look back and kick yourself, you know. But that's what he was talking about from day 1 to day 2.
Yeah. When you're when you're out there in that scenario, tournament fishing, do you put more weight into any one of the species that you really want to get in the boat?
I don't know. It depends on the year and the conditions from the day before.
Okay.
The time of year too. If it's August, you know you're going to have some Chinooks around. If it's depends upon if the water's warm or cold. If they're Chinooks in shallow water, usually want to go after them right away. Just because
size-wise?
Just because they're going to die. They're going to just get beat up and move out of that area. So
okay.
I don't go in lake trout fishing, but sometimes they're going for a pretty long run. It depends upon if there's a run time in the tournament, when the sun rises. It just makes a big deal in it. How quick you can catch some lake trout. Are there any other fish with a lake trout? Sometimes we don't fish for lake trout either. I can think of the tournaments I've won. Mostly it didn't fish for lake trout because there was kings in shallow water. I went right to the kings and lit them up. But that's what I would rather do. But we don't have many kings in shallow water. We have a good diverse fishery. Some brown trouts around at times.
Right.
Steelhead around, and it depends on what's around. If it's cohos and steelhead, well, you're going to go for the steelhead. They might be another 2-3 miles offshore, but it's
fluid.
You got to know, and you also, it can be fluid day to day. I mean, if that wind switches, and that's the big thing about the year we won a euchre, the wind switched and it blew from the west, and we had 13 nice kings the first day, and my guys were saying go deeper because that's where all the charters are. You can't talk in the radio. And I said, no, we're going shallower. And we rolled up into like 40 feet off the power plant and popped a couple of nice fish. Now, the next day, it was completely different. Those fish were gone. Jim went, you went about 7 miles north of where, and that's where they moved to. But we stayed in there and caught steelhead. And
yeah, you're supposed to keep following the fish, correct?
Yes, but you can't. You practice one day, but the big thing about fishing is that you go out and practice. Like, hey, it's a flat, calm day. You go out and catch them. Next day's flat, calm. And the next day, it's blowing. The fish have moved. Okay, they're gonna move, and then the pressure would be just making that adjustment and knowing which way to go. And you're not talking on the radio. Like the big money tournaments, you don't talk on the radio, but the smaller ones you can. But yeah.
Well, here, let me, I shouldn't say this, but I'll get in a little detail on this. Okay, so, when you select species in a tournament, obviously in a charter, you're just trying to produce fish, right?
Yeah.
But if I go back to the 80s, a majority of the tournaments that I have won are 6 lake trout, and then the rest are cohos. Well, we used to have 15 fish, okay? And then I've won more tournaments with 6 good lake trout and the rest being cohos. And I let the competition hang themselves, okay? And what do I mean by that? They'll be like, wow, we were trying for kings at the last minute, or I had a king on and it got off. Well, I don't care how good you are. If they're not around, they're not biting, I let them hang themselves. I go and I select and look for big trout, which is an art in itself. If you were going to ask me about big fish, I would say it's all luck right up front, because it is, okay? But finding the trout, the key to finding big trout is a lot of work beforehand, okay? And hog gone over the years and all them. It's not they got a special lure or speed or anything. It's going and doing the work and finding where the bigger trout are holding, and you're banking on it repeats the next day. Last year, I check everyone's trout catches. I don't know, the first 3-4 tournaments, we definitely had the biggest trout. We were getting a lot of second, thirds. We needed some bigger salmon to kick us over the top. But the truth of the matter is, when those kings aren't around and you got points on the fish, 10 points per fish, I've come in with 6 lake trout and my 9 cohos, or when it was a 15 fish catch, and just try to get the basics, try to get the good lake trout, try to get your limit, try to get your cohos, and get off the lake. And that's worked for us in tournaments a lot of times. And then if someone does run into a king or two, all right, then we just get beat. But a lot of times, fishermen are trying to look for big fish that aren't there, and they get in trouble.
They just get stuck, yeah. Because it always seems like lake trout play a big part of it because you can, guys can find them and pull them at 20 and whatnot, and that goes a long way with the weights and whatnot.
But the pressure with that is, do you fish them first? Do you fish them second? There is years they're not around. Then you're trying to catch them suspended. When they're on the bottom, it's a little bit more consistent with the trout. When you fish suspended trout, and it's, can I use the word like maybe Murphy's Law? You're catching them, they're suspended, they're coming easy, you're not fishing them, and you're catching your salmon. And the day you count on those suspended trout for a tournament, 9 out of 10 times you're going to get burnt. They're going to be small, they moved, you're trolling around. So generally, we go to the bottom, and it could be 80 feet, it could be 100, 120, it could be 200 feet. These days, that 150 to 250 on the bottom, if you can get down there and fish it, are holding a lot of trout, more than in the past. I'm sure it has something to do with the food source, okay? Or also the fishermen getting better at producing at those depths with the currents and so forth. So, yeah, for consistency on the trout, we go to the bottom. There were some years we went through some changes and we struggled at that, and it showed on our tournament results at times.
Are you bottom bouncing drawing or just kind of keeping it off the bottom?
Both. And we used to grab the bottom a lot harder in years past, but I don't know if I want to use the word the bottom's more dirty.
Slimy, green slime sometimes, but also too, when you fish the bottom, you got to tend your lures. I mean, you're get near the ground, you're going to have the mussels on there, you're going to have the green slime, and there's times where you just, I think a couple, 3 years ago, up by us, it was all green slime, and you had to move quite a ways to get out of it.
Yeah, you might have to move in or out or pick up and move 4 or 5 miles, and sometimes it could kill a tournament or a day's fishing.
Say like one tip on just targeting big lake trout for a tournament, just one thing that you're always going to do every single tournament, what would that be?
Well, I'll give you one, and Craig can think on what he's thinking. I already covered it. I'll cover it again, and it's the truth of the matter. An individual big fish to me is still just luck, right? But if you have a collective 4 trout or 6 trout, and last year, like I repeat myself here, the first 3-4 tournaments, I think collectively we had the 4 biggest trout in the tournaments. It's really coming down to just hard work. It's not a specific lure or spinning glow. Me and Rob had to discuss an hour ago. There's probably 30, 40 different baits we can collect off the shelf out there. That'll get the job done. It's just presentation in the right area on the bottom with the current and sticking at it. So I would say it's more of the hard work before the game.
Yeah, scout. I mean, last year we went out in Jim Carrington's boat before the Past the Passion, and we went out late, and we found a school of lake trout, and that's pretty much where we went the first day of the Past the Passion. But knowing that spot and then knowing the actual direction, I mean, compass direction, not just say I'm going north, but no, the actual compass direction, and that was a big help in that tournament because we landed right on them, and it was we really did good. Unfortunately, there was no kings there, so we had to move, I don't know, like 12 miles to the south and catch a bunch of cohos and no kings. So
the direction becomes critical on the trout because sometimes you're going so slow, and in tournament-wise, obviously we want to catch 4 or 6 of the biggest trout we can as fast as we can so we could spend more time on the salmon or trying to find a Chinook bite. So sometimes you have to turn around, and that direction's probably going to be okay for a charter but not a tournament, and you just got to yank them all and reset. And sometimes you just got to get on the guys and get them back there and reel everything in like the boat's on fire,
Yeah. How do you go about just fine-tuning that direction?
Ooh. Again, that'd be go the day before and in the current. And then if it's not working, Craig will just say, Jim, he'll just look at me and do one of these. And then I got to pick the direction. And if it's wrong, he'll let me know.
Mm-hmm.
But normally in lake trout, you got one side of the boat working and the other side's not.
Yeah.
And that's usually telling you something.
Yeah.
You can, if you have wire divers out, 2 of them, you kind of tell what's going on then because one's going to be walking around the block and the other one's going to be going, kind of cattywampus. So that can help. I'm not going to say it's going to make you catch more fish, but it's definitely going to keep you from getting everything messed up. And when you fish lake trout, you don't want to put a lot of stuff down there either. I think, maybe we'll put 2 of them on the ground.
Keep hearing that, right? Like less is more in some in a lot of cases.
In some cases, and if we're out deep, we're not running 3 riggers down to 250 feet because 1, it's probably too much commotion, and 2, when you get a fish on, it's just going to be get the knife out and retie everything, and you don't want to be doing that. We do that enough anyhow, but to have a mess is. And then just if you are get fishing deep, you might want to have another rod ready to launch it down there if you're not over your rod limit to get another one going. That does work at times if we have enough guys to do it, or an open rod. But
yeah, that's another tournament tip that sometimes people aren't aware of. If we know we're there for just the trout and we know we're moving for the salmon, and you're tournament fishing, everyone likes to have their 9 out, right? Craig hit the nail on the head there. If we're trout fishing, we might only put 7 rods out. We might have 7, but we have 2 trout rods in the rod rack. They're ready to go. When that rigger goes off, I'll run for not for the fish. I'll run for the other rod. I got that rigger coming up as fast as I can, and I'm dropping another setup
As they're pulling in the fish, right?
Yeah, you might, and yeah, because it might be the side of the boat. We had one passion tournament. Hog Gone won that one. We were second, but we had one tournament that 5 of our 6 trout came on one Downrigger rod, and they were good trout. I didn't even have to throw one back. There were 6 good ones in a row, and 5 or 6 came off of that one rod. I was fishing with one rod. I could have took all the others out because we were going to move for our salmon. But anyhow, in certain select situations, we will have rods ready to go, and when that rod trips and gets hit, because if you just come across a stretch, everyone's trolling for trout, and then all of a sudden you get 2, 3 on, you only got a few down there. If I can get that other one down there and double up, okay, instead of having that extra salmon rod out there in an area where there is no salmon, or they're not the salmon you're looking for, they're smaller cohos. You want to move inside for the bigger cohos that are on bait more, or you're going to move for your Chinook. So sometimes we won't fish the full 9 rods.
That makes sense. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. That's something we definitely hear more and more of, and I think it's good to say that even for folks that aren't tournament fishing, this is totally 100% I believe applicable to you on your weekend trips. That if you're finding that your entire spread, you got 3, 4 people on your boat, and you've got the full legal spread out, and sometimes pulling stuff in and taking a couple rods out and just kind of trimming or lightening the spread can go a lot. We're hearing it consistently, which is it's really
not just salmon fishing. You get the ice fishermen fishing for perch, and you get the school that comes through, and they don't even unhook the perch. You just grab the next rod, toss it down because they want to get their jig down as fast as possible. And they're not running a whole bunch of stuff. They're not going to fish 2 rods in their shacks. They're just going to get tangled up. And
yeah. It makes sense because even when I've tried to do that, you end up doing more damage because you're juggling way too many things. Just simplified and kind of go.
Fishermen get excited, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
I like the one I like is when I'm fishing a dead stick and a jig rod in the shack, and I got a tip up outside of it, and all of a sudden the tip up goes up, and the tip up's wrapped around. The northern runs right through my 2 rods in the shack, so I'm going out there. I'm pulling 2 rods literally through the hole. Yeah. So that's but
fun times.
So going back to your rod, number of rods we're running. You say you want to run, he's running the max rods. Well, it isn't always the hot tip. One, if you want to turn around, it just takes too long. We fish shallow water a lot. We want to turn that boat around on the spot. Even the lake trout thing, that's another thing. But we might turn around on those fish. And if we have all this garbage out, boards and everything, they might go on the ground because we're fishing relatively. If you're running a 300 copper, 80 feet of water, you go to turn around, it's going to get in the ground. It's going to get fouled up and not work anyhow. But sometimes it just the more commotion in the water isn't good. It depends.
Yeah. He hit the nail on the head again. Is basically what he's trying to say is if you're hooked up on a few fish, you're going through a situation and they're trout and you're kind of wiped out, you're like, well, here's the perfect opportunity to turn around. Guys, clean up the back deck. We're going to unhook these fish. Then you could quickly spin the boat and reset.
One thing you said, Craig, was you guys like to fish shallow. What depth, from what depth on do you guys consider to be shallow fishing for you?
15 feet's probably shallow. We do fish, the brown trout shallow a lot. That shallow, maybe a smidgen shallower, but back in the day there's, Chinooks, if we have cold water, they'll be in really shallow water and you're running a yellow bird and a J-plug behind it. But I think we pride ourselves on the way we run lead core, and we do really, really well on spoons and lead core in shallow, skinny water, what do we call it? And that's a lot of people are trying to run their 40-foot coppers. Well, the spoons don't work as well in the coppers they do in lead core, and you got a little bit out. And working the structure. I mean, the Racine area, that's pretty much where we're fishing. There's a lot of structure, a lot of shallow water structure, and if the water's cold enough that there's browns or Chinooks, we'll get up on that structure. But have a good plotter on your boat where you can see that structure is imperative, and and knowing that direction, the angle, because the fish it's like a river. The fish are waiting for something to come in front of them, and if you don't get it the right direction, on the days they're committing suicide, it doesn't matter. But the days that it does, we'll pull on the structure and late in tournaments and pull in and get a brown or a Chinook or so, and that's 11 o'clock in the morning, or even in front of the harbor. We got a couple fish in one of the tournaments last year that way.
Yeah, brown trout. We've been, me and Craig and the other Craig and Jim Carrington, who fishes with us, several tournaments when we needed a brown and went in there calm, sunny, high noon, 11 o'clock, and the other tournament boats are in there, and we'll pull a brown in front of them. And I hear a lot of cussing going back at the dock. You caught a brown in there? I said, well, we caught 4. What? We didn't get 1. Okay. One of the 2-mans, we got our trout, and couldn't find a salmon anywhere after sunrise. And I'm talking Al Johnson. He's the best fisherman I know. Okay, Al Johnson. I mean, once in a while we'll get him in a tournament through effort, but as far as a day-to-day fisherman, I don't know what he does, but I think the fish follow his boat around. But he's magic. But anyhow, I'm talking to him. He's like, Jim, I got 15 rods out. I'm not getting bit by salmon. And this is a 2-man tournament with my son. We got our 4 trout. And I went on in the browns. And there just wasn't a salmon bite. And even I was like, Jim, that's the right thing. Stay with it. So we caught 5 browns in a row.
Wow.
And I would say most of them were 1.5 pound. They were legal. And then the last one we struck gold was a 9-pound brown, and we won the tournament. I think we beat Arnie by like just ounces or a pound. And so you talk about picking a fish. We didn't plan that for that day. There was just no salmon action. We went in there 6 rods out, stealth, skinny water, and some of the browns were small, but every one's 11 points. It's 10 points for the fish, 1 point for, and then right at the end there, we got that big 9-pounder, and for that tournament, that was considered big, and we won. And anyone that goes in with 5 fish that are 1 pound would tell you can't win a tournament. I'm not keeping them. I'm not fishing in there. Well, that was a perfect example, like I explained earlier. We're taking what's available to us, what's given to us, because even the best fishermen sometimes they just cannot get the salmon produced. And
click, yeah.
Right, and so. I mean, the brown trout topic would be a long discussion for another day, but we have gone in there at noon. We did it in the Milwaukee tournament, ended up 3rd. We missed first by like 2 pounds. Me and Craig went in there, and we're like, we got 2 steelhead, we got our lake trout, we need 4 more fish. And we went in there at noon by the other boats, and by 1 o'clock, we had 4 browns, and one was pretty big.
One about 15, 16 pounds, yeah.
Yeah, the one I netted twice that jumped up in the
out
air.
of the net.
Yeah, it did.
I can't imagine. I wish we would have had a camera to see that, because I'm sure you guys were.
That's why you guys were in here.
Other?
That's why you guys were looking for new nets.
I was yelling at him.
We need a bigger net.
I'm sure there's a lot of yelling. Get him in when he jumped out. And,
it jumped up so fast and so high, and I put it right back in the net so quick that I don't even know if we had it. I don't know how that even happened. It was a little bit. The fish did make a good bounce. I gotta give the fish credit once in a while.
You didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
Would you say it seems like just from conversations with other anglers that of all the species, the browns tend to be the one that's a little more elusive for folks throughout the year, tournaments and stuff? It's more of a challenge, if you will. It seems like
For the most part, from May to first part of September, I'd say yeah, and because there's less browns in the lake, and they don't migrate as much, so I think they're pretty shy. They're really
You got to make a commitment on that shoreline.
And it's shallow water. I mean, they don't usually go much deeper than 80 feet, and luckily, most of the time we don't catch them much more than 50 feet. I mean, you can always catch one, but you get lucky, catch one on an orange coho dodger. But it's just, you just got to watch that structure. And there's times you're not going to be there, and you go in, and we spent the Pass to Passion a couple 3 years ago where we had, I think, 14 fish at like 8 o'clock in the morning. And that was the year we won. I think we ran around in 4 spots looking for a brown that we didn't practice, but we knew we had to get a brown to get the extra 50 points, which we didn't get. It didn't matter, but we went and tried a bunch of stuff. But I wouldn't do that unless you had the spot available to do it, or you knew that you'd practice that. And there are spots, obviously the wintertime, the power plant, pretty good. Milwaukee, pretty good for if you can get out there, but that's, the wintertime, they're attracted to that warm water. But once the water's not, the warm water discharges really aren't making an impact, this fish kind of just spread out, and they're super, super tough to catch.
Yeah. Earlier you guys mentioned that a lot of your success in shallow is because you were figuring out current in shallow that the other guys weren't, and you went and picked up 4 when nobody else was catching fish. What are you looking for when you're figuring out that current in shallow versus out deep? Because when you're out deep, you can look at your dipsies and say, hey, this isn't really running right. This one is, going underneath the boat. This one's, but when you're in shallow, if you're in 15 feet of water, you don't have dipsy. If you run in dipsies, they're only out a few feet. And so they're not going to be as telling for that current. So what are you looking for when you're in 30 feet or less, is figuring out that current?
Well, Craig likes to read the water and look at the water. And you're right. If it's a little choppy, it's a little dark, you could stretch back a rigger or get a diver to work, a slide diver. But for the most part, we're running our lead cores in there, no coppers. We'll beat the guys all day long that run coppers in there. I think it's just the way the presentation is, the way the lead core floats versus, the lead core versus the copper in there. So sometimes we'll go to 8-9 boards. Okay, and and you're getting in that 12 to 16 foot range. Sometimes we're out in 20, 25, and then we put one rigger down. And I think, the 2-man, was it the 2-man 2 years ago? We were a fish short, and we came back to the reef. We had 10, 15 minutes. We put a rigger down, and I said, Craig, put this on this. Well, we got that brown. We would have won with 9 fish, but we didn't know that. And we had about 15 minutes to fish when we came motoring in. And because it was 25 feet of water, we did put one rigger down. Speed with the browns, we're on the upside compared to most people. I'll run them at steelhead speed. There's I really don't tell people much about that. But we'll produce browns that way. And the other thing is I run a fairly tight drag because those browns, sometimes they got the hard jaw and they don't grab it hard. And people say, well, I had one on or I had 2 on. We kind of winch them in. We sometimes they're a little hard in the jaw. They grab that spoon. They don't grab it hard enough. So we try to keep our speed up, our drag's tight. And if it's super big, we'll back off on the drag. But we try to wrench them in. And we've had browns in tournaments. And I even told Jim Carrington, I says, get ready. If that 4-core goes off, I go, we got to keep that tight and winch them in. And I stick the net way under the water. As soon as we net it, the hook popped off. He goes, how'd you know that? I go, just experience, okay? Sometimes they just won't hold those hooks good, especially if you're fishing them at noon. They're not interested. They're pretty upset that they made that mistake. None of their buddies did,
Is it primarily spoons for them, or are you
for me, yeah. I Craig can cover the body baits a little bit. I think I would hit that a little harder if it was you're getting towards October or you're in April. Otherwise, we're pretty much spoons.
April stick baits like your bombers, and then September small number 3 J plugs, number 4 J plugs. It's spoons always work. I mean, typically are using the smaller spoons, although I can't say that we haven't caught, big fish on a Magnum Cracked Ice Pro King, but we weren't maybe really fishing for browns. We've caught a lot of browns on a diver, a Howie fly, and a flasher. But that's just when, everything is just, like the last week of June when everything's turned over and now the kings are all in the shallow water, the browns are in there, and there is days you'll get them, but the next day you won't. I mean, you will have one good day and say, hey, I caught them all on a Howie fly, which we've caught a lot of them on that. But in general, it's somewhat stealthy. And then the current-wise, or we're paying attention to that structure. The wind's blowing across the spot. Well, then they might be on one side or the other, but kind of pay attention to that. And you can also we let our boards out a long ways. You don't want to drive up on a 10-foot reef. You'll usually chase all the fish off in it. That's, there's kind of just that experience. And I don't write any of this stuff down. I think we just have good memory. And so everybody says, oh, a fish log and stuff. Well, we just know that, this, let's say May 16th this year versus May 16th last year versus May 16th the previous year, everything's different. It's all, looking at the water, looking at your water temp, looking at the color of the water, looking at the birds, looking at your graph. I think we do a lot of that, and I think that's made a huge difference than probably anything. And then we were talking earlier today, going to the right spot. Well, how do you know where the right spot is? Well, you're going to have to figure it out some days.
And I think part of that too, right, is you've both been on the water for a lot of years, a lot of experience, and a lot of it is putting trends together, right? You'll remember the previous April, there were similar conditions. Hey, I remember catching a lot of fish in this general area. Let's shoot over there and check it out, right? Is some of that play into it?
I want to spin off what he said. So sometimes a chrome plastic with like a prismatic type tape with either he mentioned the white Howie or the prismatic. Sometimes in August, September on a diver, you'll find a mature coho in there or browns, believe it or not. Okay. So that's a good tip right there. You don't hear people talk about that setup, but down on the inside, not in the springtime, but you get August, September and you're starting to fish inside of 30 feet of water. That's a good combination right there. But to get back on track a little bit, so for example, last year was the best year we ever had on the moonshines. I mean, they're getting their colors down really good. And normally for us, the go-to, trying to get our species, or we're fishing charters in the afternoon, it's slow. A combination of the stinger spoons is generally the rule. And I don't want to target one lure. We can go a lot of different ways with the lures. But so as a general rule, the moonshines last year were stronger than the stinger spoons, and generally it's not quite like that. So I can't even predict this year. I had a call the other day, hey, what do you predict for this year? I just predict we're going fishing. That trend could stay, change. It could be a combo of the two. It could be something else.
It's so crazy you said that, because I told Rob, like this past year, spoons, majority was all moonshine. I ended up running very few out with the stingers and stuff, and it is kind of crazy how they can kind of get into these, I don't know, moods that they want certain things, or for whatever reason that I certainly don't know. But it's cool that you said it, because you just kind of spoke to it. It's not just me that experienced that with the certain specific kind of spoon that tended to work a little bit better.
Size of the bait fish too, and the depth. If you're in really shallow water, it's cold on top versus warm on top. I think that's probably a good thing to do with it.
Just ride with the trend. Mm-hmm. Don't try to keep forcing stuff. Sometimes we get creatures of habit, and you have to be diverse and be willing to get outside your zone. Like, for example, I was talking to Rob earlier, something I wanted to mention is I'm in contact with a lot of people from the other side of the lake, or you watch their podcasts and stuff. Great fishermen, very advanced, and a lot of their tackle they use, and I'm going to plug, Lake Michigan Angler here, doesn't work over here. You could try all the different stuff. It's good to own it, but the truth of the matter is, coming right here locally and walking in and say, what are they hitting on? You're going to get the best trend locally right here, the local knowledge, okay? So be careful where you're fishing and where you're getting your information from. I'm not saying we don't purchase stuff that they use on the other side and it doesn't work, but it just, every time I'm looking for that, I don't know, perfect mouse trap or something better, and you try it, it just seems better staying with your local knowledge and what you're hearing from the local bait shops where you're fishing.
Yeah, it really changes like port to port, you know.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You know, 10 miles and 20 miles, and guys are running completely different stuff. And
right.
Your watercolor is different, your temperature's different, and the other side of the lake, the current is crazy. And usually the water's a lot warmer over there for the most part, so you're gonna have different trends. They might be running more plugs over there, and I know they do run more plugs.
Yeah.
I know he bought a lot of extra plugs, and
they run all spin doctors, right? On the other side's
yeah,
big thing for them.
you know, we probably could run more, and we don't probably run as many of those as we could. We do still run them. I ran them a lot back in the day, but it's telling me I fished in a lot of different spots, and there is always some local, like fishing the Bank Reef. I mean, the stuff that we run here, well, because it doesn't really work up there, and vice versa. So, you know, it is what it is.
Craig, where's all your notes I told you to take?
In my head.
Oh,
Let me ask you, because we've been talking quite a bit about tournament and all the kind of aspects that are involved in tournament fishing and whatnot. Let me ask you more broadly, just in terms of the tournament fishing scene as a whole. And what I mean by that is just from me learning about the industry and the fishery over the years, it sounded like back in the day there was a lot more, it was a bigger scene, a lot more going on. What's the current state of the, and it is broadly, right? What's the tournament scene like on Lake Michigan?
I'll let you take that one, Craig.
Well, in this side of the lake, I think it's been kind of status quo for the last several years. We have there's 2 tournaments out of North Point. There's 2 tournaments out of Racine with Salmon-orama, and obviously one at Kenosha and one out of Milwaukee. This year, Salmon Unlimited Wisconsin's added in a new challenge series out of Racine with a big jackpot on that, $6,000 to win over a 4-tournament deal. So tournaments have pretty much stayed status quo here. I've run a lot of tournaments, and we had a few extra ones back in the day, but at least on this side of the lake, and I'm talking pretty much from Milwaukee to Winthrop Harbor here, there's still 6 really good tournaments. Participation's decent. We always would want more anglers in them, but you know, it's tough. There's a lot of really good fishermen that win. But for me, I learned a lot by going to fish, specifically Salmon Unlimited Wisconsin club outings starting in the 90s. And I'll tell you, you walk up there with a couple of fish and you don't do so well. And then you talk to the guy that, hey, you needed to do this, you need to do that. And that's the things that the tournaments that I have anything to do with. I do interview the people that win, like the Jims or the Arnies or the Owls, and say, hey, where'd you go? What were you using? And that does help out a lot. And hey, they're going to walk into a shop here and look for that, you know, Magic Dodger maybe. But definitely it helps. People have to be willing to fish competitively to learn more about the fishing out here. That's just, you know, looking at, you know, YouTube video of somebody just putting a Dodger out and catching a fish is one thing, but going in and just developing a rapport with some friends, that's one thing, or listening and learning, and a lot to learn out here.
Yeah, I think what I've observed over the years from being in here and getting to know a lot of new fishermen that have kind of worked their way up and gotten into tournaments is a big thing that's helped them is just that rapport with people, building that network. You know, you're getting that from the tournaments. You don't build your network just by going out and fishing by yourself. And then from there, you know, you have your text circle, getting reports, and in the end, you really end up catching a lot more fish, even if you're not even trying to be competitive. It's just about learning.
Yeah, the tournament fisherman today is much better, I can tell you, from a competition level from years past. We would know a lot of things or do a lot of things that we would be at an advantage. You know, podcasts like this, you know, Dan Keating doing his thing and all this. So the information is out there, and more people are able to compete. So the competition's tougher. So sometimes you might not win. Like last year, I don't know, did we get one win, but maybe 2 or 3 seconds or thirds. I take pride in just the consistency, like the passion. I know I got a good 5, 6, 7 year run staying in the top 3. Only one win and a lot of seconds, okay? I take pride in that consistency. It takes a little bit of luck to win, but there's just so many good competitive fishermen today. And I mean this wholeheartedly. I want to win every one, right? That's the game. Like playing a card game with your buddies. You want to send them home with, no money left in his pocket if you can, okay? But the truth of the matter, when we get different winners, I mean, there was a stretch there when me and Hogg were winning a lot of, the participation goes down. When you get some new different boats or you get a Pro-Am, and you could spread the wealth with winners, or at least second and thirds, or a small boat getting a big fish. It's all a good story. It's about everybody. So the more winners we can get, the more people competing, we see the participation go up. And reality is, it should be like that. So just do your best, be happy with what you do, and go from there, and hope that there's all kinds of different winners this year.
Yeah, both of you kind of touched on with something that I guess we can maybe reformulate and give people that are watching this more directly, which is, the more people that participate, obviously it raises, the prize pools and potentially and the profile of the event and maybe sponsorships and all these kinds of things that get involved to support the tournament community and all of that. Could each of you just straight up tell folks that are watching that are on the fence, considering that I'm interested in doing the tournament thing? Obviously, it's great to have new blood. We want to welcome in the next generation of anglers that are coming in here, and especially because it's a great opportunity to pass that knowledge, from the veterans to the folks that are younger and newer into it, and that's how we keep this whole thing alive. What would you guys say in advice for folks that are considering it? What would be their first step in that direction to getting involved in tournament stuff?
Well, I would consider something like the Salmon Arama 2-in-the-boat tournament. I think this year we're probably going to go to a 5-fish limit on that. But definitely you're just going to learn something. I mean, we learned stuff from the guys that were kind of like the pioneers, the guys that started in the 60s and 70s. And, I know we were talking to Rob earlier, and it's like, well, we don't want somebody to go buy the Tutti Frutti lure and use it once when the fish are biting. And we really want people to know, learn what they used. And I don't think any of us, when we do a talk at a tournament, we weren't using the some goofy lure that you can't get anywhere. And it's usually a common lure. It's usually more the location. But that's the big thing there is just teaching people where you were, what you were using, and when you did it. And, Jim does several of the interviews and pretty much, does the pretty much good rundown. But definitely get out and you don't be afraid of it, and don't be afraid to ask a question. I mean, try to get, hook up with one or two of the pro guys. I mean, even they back in the day of the Morris tournament, they did, the join, what do you call it? You join forces with a, AM and a pro boat. They did that, and I think that was a really good thing that we could bring back.
It takes some coordination.
It takes some coordination, but I'll tell you what, it was good because you saw the guy, the best chance guy talking to a smaller boat and they were working together on it. And
yeah, that's pretty cool. It creates a friendship, and you could help pull people up. I mean, the way I would start is, perfect plug right here. Dan Keating's coming up. Start with that. I mean, he gets pretty in-depth, maybe more than a lot of people need to know, but start with that. Come to these seminars. Watch these podcasts. Come in and twist Mike and Rob's ear. Get the information. Don't necessarily always try to do it yourself. Not all those good fishermen out there, trust me, they are on the phone. They're talking to every little boat that's running 6 rods in here, the guy going out deep for steelhead. Some of us aren't as good or better than these other people than you think. It's the flow of information. So if a guy was to enter a tournament, don't put the pressure on yourself maybe winning, because once you do, it takes a little different angle or approach to things, but hang around for the hot dogs or the beer and listen to the guys talk. And I'll be honest with you, most people are pretty honest. If they got a secret, they're not going to mislead you, but they're going to give you a lot of information. And not only that, even if you don't do that great in a tournament, you're learning for your fishing when you're just out with your friends, your charter, and so forth.
I think, too, there's some really good fishing clubs that have routine meetings. Wisconsin Salmon Unlimited, Illinois Salmon Unlimited, Milwaukee, Port Washington. We've all done talks there, and
hit the seminars.
They do a seminar, and usually it's some information with them at every meeting. So, and then you ask them questions, and if you don't like what you hear, talk to the president and go up and do a talk. And I've done plenty of talks where I go up there and just make people ask me questions, or I have questions, and then involve the crowd, and that's just get people to spill the beans in a meeting setting is a great way of learning something.
Yeah, most people like being asked questions. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you just go up and say, hey, great job, how'd you do, and what were you doing? A lot of people are just happy to be asked.
That's right. And I think the other thing is Salmon Unlimited Illinois. I know it's February 7th or 8th. I think Jerry's going to be there talking about the deep water stuff, which ain't for all the boats because, it's a little bit harder if you don't have a bigger boat. But anyhow, hit the seminars, hit the club meetings, get yourself out there, show up at the launch ramps. Maybe you don't even have necessarily a group that you could fish on a tournament or you had to work one day, but maybe you get there after the tournament and just hang out.
Yeah.
And, go to the tournament committee guys. Like one guy will be Craig, and I'll say, hey, I didn't get to fish the tournament. I just like to hang out and maybe learn a little bit. And he'll be like, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even in tournaments where I asked, I think the two in the boat last year said, anybody know where to go fishing tomorrow? And a couple guys didn't know where to go. And I just go out to 100 foot, set up, and straight out of town, you're going to catch some fish. And I have no problem telling somebody that, at least, if they're, so don't be afraid to ask a question. And I have no problem blabbing it across the microphone. I mean, I know some people might not like that, but, we really want more people to participate. The participation in general is down on the lake anyhow. So, but it's a great fishery. It's as good as it's probably ever been from a diversity perspective. Maybe not the big, catching 30 kings, but everybody remembers back in the day. And back in the day, there was some really tough times we had in this lake, specifically with BKD, and where you didn't catch any kings. So if anybody says, "Oh, the DNR is trying," okay? I mean, it's a really hard lake to manage. And you don't want to put 7 million Chinooks in the lake and then have no bait. So, and then have the BKD thing where you couldn't even catch a Chinook. So there's a fine line there. I know that the Arnie and the Lakeshore team are doing a good job on, working with the DNR and giving them feedback. And I appreciate what they've done for that also.
Yeah. Here's another thing, pre-fishing tournaments. I've won tournaments, didn't pre-fish, couldn't get out of work, other personal issues, and I won them. And I'm like, there's reasons for that sometimes, because when people fish a certain area, let's say, and it was dead, they're like, I'm not going there tomorrow. I'm going up here. I'm running there. And the fish were just off that day, and me not knowing any better, go where I normally fish, where they were the day before, and it was tough. And next thing you know, I'd win with a charter, And trust me, they were pretty bad on the rods, but we somehow pulled it off. And they showed off an hour late, so that was a miracle. But yeah, anyhow, and here's another thing when I fish tournaments. Me and Craig at night, we have visions of sugar plums. We're drawing up this program where we're going to fish and catch these fish. The next day, majority of the time, your program just, it doesn't work. You end up sometimes fishing in areas you never thought you were going to fish, lures you were going to run. So you have to be open-minded. And sometimes we're stubborn and we know we have to stay with our program and just chip away until they bite around 10, 11, 12. And if they don't, well, then we fall on our face. And then sometimes we know this ain't going to happen. They're not here today. Like the second day of Passion, the one we won, we could have collapsed. We were sitting with the lead. We could have quit. We moved 3 times. It was rough, and it worked out. So sometimes, like that day, we had no idea we were fishing those second 2 spots. And we did, and they both worked. One had cohos, one had Chinook. So sometimes we don't even know what we're doing the next day. And we're not lying. So if we said something the day before and we end up, someone spots us somewhere else, it happens. You got to feel for it.
Yeah, so you mentioned something like earlier about like, all right, we're just going to grind it out and just pick away at fish. But we also, like you'll make quick decisions and run and change things real fast. And that's like a dilemma that I hear people talk about all the time in tournaments. Do we just grind it out? Do we run and gun? What's your thought process on deciding if you're going to grind it out for a couple bites at 11 o'clock, or you're just going to, make a 5-mile run down to the next area? Especially in a tournament where you can't talk on the radio and you don't know what other people are doing.
Yeah, I mean, you can, it's almost like a football game plan all week. You go into halftime and it didn't go as planned. Okay, Aaron Rodgers, the Packers, they can make adjustments. Me, a Bears fan, they go into halftime and they collapse because they don't know what to do next. Okay?
I'm traumatized. Let's not talk about that.
So, but the point there is so when you make that decision, just like anybody's game plan, you got to feel for it. And if you make the wrong mistake, well, then you just lose. That's all. It's not like you got shot, even though I should be sometimes. But you have to feel, are you getting a bite every 20 minutes? And our boat's moving around and running all over? Our boat's having a trend trolling one way. So let's say I can't talk on the radio, okay? But it's not illegal to look around you. Okay, right. Like Craig likes to watch what the seagulls and the watercolors and currents are doing. But if I have some charter buddies or boats I know that just keep turning around on the inside and I could see them way in there circling and I know they weren't there the day before, they're in there for a reason. So I might have to pick up and run and just try it and see if it works. So yeah, sometimes it's really tough. So yeah, when you make a move and not, especially when your original plan didn't work. If that move was in the plans because you know the steelhead were hitting in the afternoon or later in the day, or you're moving into the shoreline for the browns because you got to have that species or something. But boy, it's just feel at the time, and I'll sit there and talk with 3-4 guys, and I want their input, even though I think I'm smarter than them. I let them have their input, and I make them feel important, and then maybe between the 3-4 of us, we can make the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it too is if you're making a long run, which a lot of times we might run 20 miles, or we've run from Waukegan to the power plant, and so it's like 35-mile run in some almost in a gale warning before, and the run, usually the move you make is on the way back. You usually, unless you really have an idea that they're up by the the power plant and you're fishing off the Kenosha bubbler and you got to run all the way to the Oak Creek power plant, well, you're losing an hour of fishing time. So any of these moves usually are strategic to getting back to whatever port we're starting at. Usually.
That makes a lot of sense. I'll tell you what, guys, it's been really, really cool to kind of basically get an insight into your guys' minds as you approach the tournament aspect of it, and so many variables, and it was really, really cool. So, Rob, do you have anything else?
I think we covered everything really well.
Yeah.
Great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And as they said, if you're interested in this stuff, get involved. Before we go, though, can you both let folks know? Obviously, we talked about tournament stuff, but you guys run charters. And so if anyone wants to get out and experience the fishing with you guys, go ahead and let them know where they can reach you.
Yeah, I'm out of Racine, Stormtrooper Charters, and Craig fishes with me. And, you can always come and talk to Rob and Mike and so forth.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to just get a charter with Jim, and he'll teach you how to tournament fish too. So that's another thing is get on a. I mean, I think Dan Keating does that too. You can hook up with him if you want to learn how to do it, and he's really good at it. And or any charters, there's some pretty good charters that fish.
Yeah, I mean, I know tournament fishermen that have booked trips with you just to learn more about how you fish.
That's a smart.
Rather it's not. You're not just chartering people that just want to go and drink beer and. There are people going out there that want to learn how to catch fish for a tournament.
They do, and sometimes when they come out with me, what I tell them, they're like, "Well, I run that lure. Yeah, I put a downrigger down and all this," and they see that we're maybe not as magical or different than anyone else with the equipment we have. A lot of times, there's luck, and I could tell you several tournaments that we won that we necessarily didn't fish the best. Okay, and then I've had tournaments that guys we did great. And we just lost those 2-3 kings at the end. We can't go in and cry about it, even though I will. And we fished great. It just didn't work out, okay? But so when people come out with me sometimes, what I try to explain to them, it's the consistency. Are you prepared for the tournament? Are you losing fish? Are your hook sharp? Are you breaking lines? the decision making of that day during a tournament. Some people crack. They put a little too much pressure on them, and they think they got to get the big king, or they make some screwy moves. So a lot of it is really decision making that separates the. It's the pre-fishing, the hard work ahead of time, and trying to be consistent and making decisions that particular day. But as far as the lures, the riggers, and all that, there's not that many secrets.
No. And then the day you start realizing it's the same stuff, just how it's being ran and whatnot. So thank you both for joining us on the podcast. I'd love to have you guys back. And actually, if at any point in this coming season, when you guys have a tournament, we did it last year. We'd love to film something for the shop and give people, they really loved it too, which was the inside look on the tournament experience. And we kind of like to fly on the wall on the boat, and you guys are doing your thing. So if that's ever an opportunity, we'd love to do that and capture the you know, that perspective from you guys and how you operate, and without giving away obviously the secrets there. We'll edit those out, you know. So guys like, oh, I don't know about that. You're gonna see all this stuff. And I think, no, we can edit out. Just let me know what parts you don't want to and whatnot. But I'd love to have you guys back as well. And thank you so much for your time, guys. Thank you for watching this podcast. Make sure you guys throw the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, like the video. And we'll have information down below where you can reach out to both of the gentlemen here to book a trip, pick their brains, interested in tournaments. Here you go. You got two top-tier anglers here on the lake. And, yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Bye.